What's going on, everyone? So, Scream 7 is supposed to center around Sidney Prescott and her family. Now, again, these are all just rumors, speculation, but makes a lot of sense, right? If this is going to be a Sidney driven, Sidney focused film, we know, have children, married to Mark Kincaid. At some point, you gotta have some type of just scenes and some type of just connection with an audience to her family. Right? You can't just keep like hiding it in the background because at some point it's like, okay, well, why did you even introduce the family? So Sydney's supposed to have young children that are being targeted, as well as Mark Kincaid and her, and that in and of itself, I think, could make for a great story. We'll see how the execution is. We'll see how the writing is. Ghostface targeting Sydney and her family, where she is vulnerable, right? Where it's always been her. She never really had anybody else that she had to worry about as much to the level of her children and her husband. It's kind of just always been her going out, battling Ghostface, and you live, you die type thing. Where now it's like, no, there's like repercussions. Does she get put in a compromised position that ultimately could lead to her demise, right? Like, it's a lot of questions. I don't think that'll happen. It's Sidney Prescott, but still, it's fun to have this kind of unknown and level of mystery to it all, and to see Sidney Prescott in a position that we've never seen her in, right? Because she's never had children and a husband that she's having to protect and take care of on top of keeping herself alive. But the big question that I am curious to see with this film, beyond all the Sydney stuff, which we'll continue to explore as we go down the road, but it's also the other side of this, right? So Sydney and Gale are supposed to be the main characters, and it's supposed to be like a story driven by them, and then Sydney's family. And then there's supposed to be a new cast and a new group of characters and a new lead, right? So you're going to introduce this new sort of franchise girl that you're going to hopefully connect and well enough with an audience to where people buy in, and then you can continue to make films down the road. Like, right, that was the idea of Melissa Barrera as Sam. And you got the two Scream films, but as we saw with Scream 5, the execution, delivery, and story, and just the acting in which Melissa portrayed Sam really fell flat with most people. Like, the consensus was, hey, she wasn't very good, and this wasn't a good film to kind of highlight her, and we want somebody else type thing. Then you saw in Scream 6, people really started to come around to her, right? Again, you're only as good as the writing that you have, but they kind of allowed her to explore and have a little more range, and you got to see a little more, and a lot of people kind of came around to Sam. But it took two movies, right? I don't know if you could really do that again, but I also have the concern of how do you. So you're going to have this story of Sydney, her children, and like the family dynamic. And then you're also going to integrate Gale. Okay, that's fine. And then you're going to try to build and highlight some new character that I would imagine is going to have a significant direct tie-in to the story. Are they going to be able to do that and juggle that all in one film? Because, I mean, Sydney and her family alone could be enough to kind of drive the film, where you have like all these just random casualties, right? Sydney's grown. Like, to me, I almost feel like you're better off doing a Sydney movie where it's her family, and then just like the people close to her are being killed, right? Like her friends, right? Because you got to imagine she's a family woman, right? She's a wife, and so I'm sure she has other wife friends, and she's going to events, and she's going to whatever, drinking paints or whatever, right? Like, to me, I almost feel like focus the film on Sydney, her family. Ghostface is kind of picking off people around her. Maybe there's some direct connection or something, or maybe you're trying to have Sydney seem like she's the killer, and us as an audience, we know it's not, but like everyone around, it's like, well, both your neighbors are dead, and your two best friends were just killed, like, and whatever, your hair was found at the crime scene and all this. It's just like, you can't go leave, you can't go nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, you could just, I think it'd be easier to just do a story like that. I just have my concerns about this film kind of getting a little too convoluted, and then you're trying to build a new character that you can kind of continue this franchise with and create more films with. And it's like, do you end up falling flat? Do you end up failing to deliver on that character like you did with Sam originally? It's a concern, because again, it's like with Scream 5, they were trying to tell, the Dewey story and highlight Dewey and then Gale's relationship and dynamic, and then they're trying to build Sam and her characters and Tara and her friend group, and it's just like they were trying to juggle so many things, and they weren't able to execute it properly. A great example of that being properly executed, however you felt about the movie itself, but Scream 4 did a really good job of telling the Gale, Dewey, Sidney story, integrating new characters, having a new lead in Jill, and actually building and telling the story of those characters. Again, I've talked about my complaints and concerns with Scream 4 and why, it's kind of where it is in my pecking order. But it was, well, like, the actual development and the multiple storylines that were all kind of taking place, I did think was well executed. I just think it had its issues in general. Again, a lot of people, Scream 4 is their favorite of the Scream franchise and their favorite sequel. So again, I completely get it. I completely understand that. But my thing is, like, are they going to be able to introduce a new group, develop those characters, tell the story, tell the Sidney story, tell the Gale story? I just feel like somebody is going to be left to the wayside, kind of like we saw in Scream 5 and 6, right? Like, they haven't done the best job of being able to kind of convincingly tell multiple stories that all tie into the main story, right? Like, because if it's, I don't necessarily, like, this movie's supposed to be like a half and half, but I don't want it to literally be like a half and half. I don't want, like, the first half to be about Sidney and her family. Maybe it's the opening scene, she's attacked, and then it just, like, cuts away, and then we don't see Sidney till, like, an hour later. And it's like, what? Like, wait a minute, like, what are we doing here? Right? And it's like, well, you're trying to build a new character, and then now it's like, it's flip-flopping, and we're trying to pick back up, and it's like, so what happened in between? What happened? Like, how did we get here? What is the, you know what I mean? Like, and now it's just like all this time's passed, and it's like, I'm worried about the cohesion of the story. Can they properly have it flow right? Can they make it, where you're able, because character development is everything. Having good, convincing characters is everything. I mean, Scream 96 had basically every character in it fans want back. I mean, Stu, right? Like, you have a huge chunk of the audience and huge chunk of the fandom that would give anything to have Stu back, right? Because it was good development. It was a good character. It was a good story. You were able to develop them, right? Like, you were able to hit home on this group and tell the Gale Weathers story and tell the Dewey story and, and have all these connections and ties, right? And then same thing with Scream 2. You had the Derek and you had the Cotton, and you had, like, can they get back to that? Or is this just kind of a movie where it's like a little scatterbrained, a little kind of all over the place, doesn't really properly flow to the level in which it does? I'm hopeful because Kevin Williamson's involved. My hope is that, like, he has some say and some direction, at least with, like, Gale and Sidney, right? Because they're his characters. So one of the big problems that I think Scream 5 and 6 has had is it's like they haven't known how to properly integrate Gale and Sidney, right? It's almost like they don't know, which makes sense because it's not their characters, right? They didn't write them, they didn't build them, they didn't develop them. They're kind of just piggybacking off the characters. And you see that a lot with these remakes, right? Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Like that remake, it was like, what are we doing with Sally? Like, it's just ridiculous, right? It was just like, so much so people are making fun of it, right? Like, so it's just, to me, it feels like they don't really know how to properly tell a Gale and Sidney and Dewey story. And so I'm hoping that, like, maybe just kind of leave that to Kevin. Let Kevin make the notes and kind of steer you with those characters. And then you develop your new core characters. And then that way it's like a collective effort. And now you are in a position to where, maybe you could tell the whole story, right? Because Kevin can, like, okay, here, write your story with your new characters. I'll tie Sidney Gale into this installment, right? Like, it's kind of something that I would hope, but we'll see. Time will tell. Anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you have concerns about the properly integrating the new lead character? Do you think no, it should be fine? You should be able to easily tell both stories. Again, I would feel whatever your thoughts are. I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So I enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.